All right, let's take a look at Galatians chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. And just the first three verses here, you're going to see the child and the servant in the house, the slave, being compared by the Apostle Paul. This lesson is going to give you a little more detail. It's important that you make the distinction here that the child the Apostle Paul is referencing is not a child of God in the sense that they've been born again. And you have to notice the context there to make this, to understand this, to make this connection. Otherwise, you will wrongly interpret these first three verses. So, what would you consider to be a sign of spiritual immaturity in your life? Okay, because as Paul is dealing with a child here, an unsaved individual, think in terms of application to the Christian, just to get us thinking. What is a sign of immaturity? So in this lesson, the immature child is the unsaved person before Christ has come, but Paul is speaking to saved individuals who are reverting back to what they believed in or how they believed before salvation. So again, just a quick question, opening question on your lesson is, what would you consider to be a sign of spiritual immaturity in your life? Often you might hear things like lack of biblical understanding, or lack of temperance or self-control, or maybe someone continuing to live and struggle with sin. And those would all be good answers, but those aren't really what Paul is going to be driving at in this particular lesson or these verses. The spiritual immaturity that he's speaking about or addressing by using this analogy of a child is that of reverting back to placing weight or merit on their own works with God. Okay, please list what you consider to be values that make life worth living. Or another way to say this is, what do you place your identity in? What's your identity staked in? Relationships, money, success, education, knowledge, all of those things. We could have easily put one in here that people place their identity in their obedience or their righteousness, which it would be a better application for the context here with the Galatian Christians. Now, the lesson objective is one, to learn that it is childish to revert back to placing your identity in anything other than the Lord. And again, remember, he's writing to Christians who did believe by grace through faith, and they did believe the gospel that Paul had preached. But when circumcision was being added and an attempt was made by Judaizers to add works to Christ, they were reverting back to believing and placing faith in that work. And so, again, the point here is that it is childish. It is immature to revert back to that once you have been maturated by faith, by grace through faith. And so there were three main points in the lesson. You'll see them fleshed out throughout the document that you've received. Verses 1 and 2, the child is equal to the slave until he comes of age. And verse number 3, the identity of the immature child, who is Paul speaking about, and that point explains who could be the immature child. And then the application includes three main areas where we tend to revert back to immature belief in first one, religion, second, superstition, and then thirdly, morality. Regarding religion, some people place faith in sacraments. Now, I'm talking about people who have begun by grace through faith and said Jesus is the only way and he's paid fully. They revert back to placing some kind of merit in a work they do spiritually. And I'm using the word sacraments here with the idea that it has redeeming value, because I know there's some that don't associate redemption with sacraments, but that's the way I am using it, at least in this particular lesson. The other one is superstition. For example, knock on wood. In your lesson, there are, I think, 10 examples of some of the most common superstitions in America. And while this might seem comical, people tend to revert to superstitious beliefs. For example, somebody has something bad happen to them, like a car accident, and all of a sudden they think that either God's trying to teach them something or God's trying to punish them about something, or if they would have listened to their parents, then they wouldn't have gotten in the accident. And it's crazy how much faith we place in superstition, though we might say we're not superstitious. And so, again, some examples there in the lesson for you. And then another way that people revert back, or in another area, I should say, they revert back is things like observance of days. This is morality, trying to do good works. The other one I put in here is the worship of the family institution. This is a subtle one that has crept in, and we hear a lot about it, and and people take so much pride in their particular institution, and we need to be really careful here because ultimately our goal is not to worship the institution of the family. Our purpose is to worship God and God alone. And so our society is emphasizing this, especially in a conservative society like we're at, primarily here in Southwest Ohio. And so I would caution against this. Read the statistics that I've put in there for you in the lesson, and then make sure that you make application to your respective classes. And then in the conclusion, just a statement that kind of draws everything together. It is childish to believe that having a good family gains us merit with God, but it is mature to believe that because we are 100% acceptable with God in Christ, we should serve diligently to have a good family. And so there's nothing wrong with making a goal of having a good family and good relationships. What's wrong is when our identity is completely staked in that. And what does that say about the identity we have in Jesus? And then, as you continue reading this particular statement, it is childish to believe in karma as the process by which justice is accomplished, but it is mature to believe that Christ has fully suffered so that I can be justified. It is childish to believe that if I take the Lord's table, it will make me more acceptable with God. But it is mature to believe that because I am fully accepted in the beloved, Ephesians 1:6, I should take the Lord's table with my local church. Okay, and so a shift in perspective and paradigm should be considered here. God bless you as you study and as you teach the lesson to your class.